I'm so excited you're here. Welcome to Rising Up Rare. I'm your host, Allie Ladd, mom and advocate of 2 kids with MPS 1 and co-founder of the Kennedy Ladd Foundation. In each episode, we'll explore personal stories of resilience, hope, and the hard-earned lessons we've learned while navigating rare disease. My hope is that you feel less alone and remember that each of us have a unique gift to help someone else. May these conversations bring hope and inspire action. Together, let's rise up. Happy Monday. It is a Monday here. It has been a Monday, but I'm so thankful to talk to you today. I have Emma Mizer here with me. She is another MPS 1 mom. And it's so funny because my last podcast was with Kayla Stanford, and her daughter's name is Kennedy. And then now I'm having this podcast with Emma, and her son's name is Lincoln. So that is really ironic and really funny. But I'm so thankful to have you today. I'm going to let you just kind of kick it off. Tell us a little bit about your family, and then maybe just kind of guide us into Lincoln being born and maybe into his diagnosis, and we'll go from there.
All right. Yep. So I'm Emma. My husband's name is JJ, and our little boy is Lincoln. He's now 18 months. JJ and I met in college at Miami University, and we got married, and just we were married for a few years, decided we were ready to start a family, got pregnant, had a decent, pregnancy, no issues. We did genetic testing just for, what they usually test for, cystic fibrosis, Down syndrome, all of those. Everything came back negative. All of, the ultrasound scans were great. So we expected to have a healthy baby. And then Lincoln was born on September 8th, 2023. And immediately, the first day he was born, he failed his newborn hearing screen, and he wasn't even 24 hours old. So I just remember my mom was there, and she asked the nurses, like, can you just come back tomorrow and do it? Like, maybe he still has fluid in his ears. Let's just wait a little bit. So they came back the next day and they tested him again, and he failed again. So I was, very anxious and worried, thinking that he was deaf. But we went home, the next day after he was born. We were only in the hospital for about a day and a half or so. We went home. I was a wreck, thinking, my son is deaf, and I was super hyper aware of, like, when our dog barked, looking at him, like, did he react? Just super, I don't know, just anxious about it. How are we going to communicate with him? Just getting ahead of myself. But when he was 7 days old, we took him to Cincinnati Children's to get a repeat ABR, which is the hearing test, where they put, like, electrodes around the head and behind the ears, and they were able to tell us that he does have hearing. He has minor hearing loss, nothing, substantial, but he might need a hearing aid. One side was, worse than the other. There was nothing wrong that they could see physically with his ears. And so they said, oh, maybe it could be a virus, or maybe, it's just his ears didn't form properly on the inside. So that was that. Good news. He's not deaf. He maybe has some hearing loss, but he can hear us. It's okay. So that was when he was 7 days old. We went home. I was relieved. Not even about 3 hours later, we got a call. I was thinking it was the audiologist, because they told us someone's going to be calling you later on just to kind of, like, tell you next steps. Just, we're going to just help you along this journey. They were going to connect us with a program, just if he did need hearing aids later on. So I was just expecting that call, but it was a call from a geneticist, and they said that he was flagged on the newborn screen for something called MPS 1. And I said, well, what is that? The only words I remember is it's a very rare genetic disease, and historically kids only live until they're 5 to 10 years old without treatment. And here I am 7 days postpartum with my first son, and I'm nursing him, and he is like kind of sleeping, and I'm just on the couch with my husband and my mom. And I just remember throwing my phone when she said those words. I could not take it. I don't even remember. It's such a traumatic thing that I don't even remember if my mom picked up the phone and continued talking with the person or if I did. I just remember she said he's going to have to come in for additional blood work, so we can confirm. And there's treatments, and that was it. It was like a 3 to 5 minute phone call. Um, they said don't Google it. If you do want additional information, go to MPS Society. And that was really it. And so here I was thinking that my baby boy was going to die in 5 years and he was going to have no quality of life. And that was probably the darkest day of my entire life. Yeah, that was,
I'm so shocked
yeah,
that that was what was said in that phone call. I
yeah,
guess even more because I have heard many stories, and that's one thing we kind of talk about and maybe advocate about, bring up in conferences. I'm actually going to a newborn screening conference. Is what is that first call? Who gives that first call? What is said in that first call? And a lot of times, sometimes it's maybe from a pediatric doctor that doesn't know, much about
mhm,
MPS. And so that a genetic counselor called and said that. But then to me, my experience too is with Cincinnati. So I would think an experienced genetic counselor in MPS 1, and that's what was said over the phone. I am so
yeah.
shocked.
It was really hard. And I just remember my mom saying like hours later, I mean, I was a wreck. I was crying constantly. I was not able to eat, drink, sleep. Like I was an absolute mess. And I just remember her saying like, everything's going to be okay. If we have to get him a bone marrow transplant, we'll get him a bone marrow transplant. And in my mind, I was thinking like, what the heck, a bone marrow transplant? Like I thought she was just throwing something out there as like an example of a very crazy, like if we have to go to the ends of the earth for him, we'll do it. I did not realize that that was actually what the treatment was. And that was not said over the phone that, I mean, they on that phone call, I remember they did say like with treatments, there are people living to their late 20s and 30s, but that was really it. And even then, you don't want to ever think that your child is going to pass away before you. You never want your child to suffer or go through that. So it's like, okay, even if there is treatment, 30 is not good enough for me. Um, so it was, yeah, it was very traumatic. And we didn't have any answers. We didn't have anything. So I believe that was a Friday. So of course we couldn't get in to see a doctor, to talk to anyone, anything until Monday. So we spent the entire weekend just believing that our baby was going to die in a few years. So it's really crazy because we were grieving him, even though he was alive in our arms, we were grieving him.
Cool. Oh, we went through the kind of made me tear up. Just I don't really know all of your story, but you just say, the newborn or the newborn screening test for his hearing, that was ours with Lincoln. So like
Yeah.
Kennedy didn't fail that when she was born, which when I had Lincoln, of course, I knew that Kennedy had it and it was a possibility, but we
Yeah.
had not had Lincoln tested. And so when he was born, the first 24 hours, he failed his hearing test. And
So you
that
just
was a
knew.
red flag to me.
Yeah.
And we had asked for them to like redo it. And they basically were like, you will come back and see, I think, audiology like in 2 weeks. But I
Yep.
think
Yep.
they did agree to do it the next day, and he failed it again. And we asked to have like an echo and stuff of his heart, and they were like, "You're crazy, we don't do
Yeah.
that." And I'm like, "Well, his sister has MPS 1," and they're like, they wouldn't do it. And 2 weeks later, we went for the follow up appointment. He failed it in that appointment. I just started bawling, crying because I knew. And that
Yeah.
day, on the way home, that's when we got the call from Cincinnati that he did have it.
Yeah. And it's
So
just so crazy because, I mean, those first 7 days before we, got that phone call, I thought he was deaf and I thought it was the worst thing in the entire world. How could my baby be deaf? How are we going to communicate with him? Do I need to learn sign language? And looking back, it's like, wow,
only
it would have been okay. It would have been
only he
okay.
was deaf. Yeah.
Yeah. And I hate to say that, but it's like if I had him being deaf versus having MPS 1, I would pick him being deaf all day long.
Yeah.
Because there's cochlear implants, there's sign language, there's things you can do. And right now, there's not much you can do for MPS 1.
So how did you all choose Cincinnati? It sounds like they kind of chose you in the beginning, but
Yep.
How did you get with Cincinnati Children's?
Yep. So we live about 20 to 30 minutes from Cincinnati Children's. So I think just the proximity is how that geneticist contacted us. And so we went in for that blood work, and I believe it took about 2 weeks to get like an official diagnosis. Um, so then when we went back in to speak to them, we had our official diagnosis. They went over the treatment options, and they said, basically there's 3 hospitals in the nation that is experienced in bone marrow transplants for MPS 1. It's Cincinnati, Minnesota, and Duke. Um, we live 30 minutes from Cincinnati. It was kind of a no-brainer for us. But they also told us there is gene therapy clinical trial going on in Minnesota. It was like you want to do what is best, and how do you know what is best? Um, and so I think, our minds just went to, right now the bone marrow transplant is the best treatment option. And it's so hard to put your child in a clinical trial, not knowing what the outcome's going to be. And it might be better than the bone marrow transplant. And so it's like really hard to make that decision. But we just knew that we needed to be home and close to family and just get him the treatment that they know is successful. Um, so that's how we ended up there. And I believe the next week after that appointment was when he started his enzyme therapy replacement at 5 weeks old.
And they still, in that clinical trial, still required a test arm, which was some that we kind of argue about. And I don't know if you call it a test arm since they still get treatment because it's not placebo, but you could have went to Minnesota and it was 50-50 and been selected for a bone marrow transplant.
Yeah.
So that is a hard decision. You say you don't know what decision to make. And that's one of the hard things about MPS 1. There is no black and white.
Yeah.
There is no child or journey that is the same. There is no doctor that has the same recommendation. You're literally just picking all the information you can and making the best decision you feel like you can make for your family. And that makes it extremely hard.
Yeah. I mean, we knew they basically said, you do nothing, and they have maybe 5 years of suffering, essentially. You do just enzyme replacement therapy, which helps the body, but it doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier. So their brain is not protected. They'll have neurological deficits. Or you do a bone marrow transplant or the gene therapy, which will protect the brain and protect the body. So it's like there's risks associated with that, but there really is no other option, because you're not going to just leave your child to suffer. You're not going to leave them to not have treatment. So yeah, we started enzyme replacement therapy, and it wasn't just enzyme replacement therapy once a week. It was all of the pre-BMT appointments. It was checking every single system of his body. So every single week we had about 3 to 4 appointments, seeing different doctors, different specialists, talking to insurance people, just like it was nonstop. And I'm, a new mother just trying to figure out how to be a mom to a baby, and then dealing with everything else that was going on. It was truly the hardest time of my entire life. I could barely even take care of myself. I had my mom, my grandma, my aunt from Florida drove up. JJ's parents were supporting us. Like, it took all of us coming together to do what we could for Lincoln. And yeah, looking back, like I was taking care of him, but people were taking care of me because I was not eating, I was not sleeping. I was literally, I know this is like maybe TMI, but I was throwing up constantly because that's how, like, when I get very anxious, and I already, since high school, I've been on anti-anxiety medication. So it's already something I deal with. I just remember I was waking up in the middle of the night, if I was even sleeping at all, just throwing up because my body could not handle the fear and the anxiety. Um, so it was really bad. I just remember, my mom coming down trying to make me eat a piece of toast or like take a sip of water, and I couldn't even do that. Um, and that was really for the first 4 or 5 weeks. And um, I remember the very first time where I settled down was when I found you guys, the Kennedy Ladd Foundation, on Instagram, and I saw pictures of Kennedy and Lincoln. And that was literally the first time where I was like, it's going to be okay. These kids are playing baseball, playing softball, they're going to school, they're living life, and our baby's going to be okay. And it was still so hard, like that fear and anxiety didn't go away, but at least I saw for the first time children living with this disease, and it seemed like they were thriving and they were happy, and that's all that I cared about, was that my baby was going to be happy.
I mean,
And I remember I texted you because I remember Lisa from Cincinnati Children's, the geneticist, she gave me your number. And I was really afraid to text you. I was like, they're not going to want to, deal with me. But I remember you guys were on a cruise because it was before Kennedy's surgery. And I remember you were probably like, I'm so sorry, because I think it was a day later, like we're out of the country and all of that. But you told me, everything's going to be okay. Like, we're here for you, let us know if you need anything. And so that was really the first time where I was like, it's going to be okay. There's a community here. We're going to get support from, people who understand.
wow, that is so special, and what a strong testimony for us, because
Yeah.
you're not one of the first people, but I'm hearing it more often. So it's really like, for years, we're like, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we making these videos?
Yeah.
Why do people want to hear us speak? And now it's starting to come full circle that you Google it, what you hear from the doctors is doom and gloom. And I can remember being in your shoes and, doing all the searches, and you would find an older kid and I would show it to my husband. I'd be like, this person's so-and-so, this person went to prom.
Yeah.
And so it really didn't make sense until just recently, when families, I guess, are using social media more, and YouTube and things, and finding our family, and they're saying what you're saying, that it was the first time we had hope. And so I was like, it's so special, because that's what we say while we exist, is create hope for MPS 1 families. And hope for us means helping one person every day. So it's a really moving, special testimony for me. So I'm so thankful you found us. I'm getting more calls every day. And so just every day is a different story.
Yep.
And how community and people can help each other. And it's all about, the early diagnosis is hard, but you only know what you know. And like the education and the talking to the other moms and the lived experiences is really how we have gotten through this too. You meet somebody and they give that one tip of advice, and you're like, why didn't I know this 3 years ago? It made my life so much easier, and it could be something so simple. So I'm really thankful you text me. I'm really thankful that you reached out. I hate that I'm not good at communicating and that I don't stay in touch as much as I should, but it is really special.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've had a lot of support. Your family has been very supportive. But it's still, as we both know, going through a bone marrow transplant, the diagnosis, the appointment, all the things is still a journey. It's still a financial burden. It's still a time burden. How did you all get through that? How did you go through the bone marrow transplant process and take care of Lincoln and be able to get through?
Yeah. So Um, when we got the official diagnosis and we had that first appointment with the geneticist, they said, we're doing a bone marrow transplant. We decided that that's what we're going to do. But you always hear, these horror stories of insurance is not going to cover this $2 million procedure. Um, the enzyme replacement therapy, I'm pretty sure like each each bag of that enzymes is like something crazy, like $7,000 or something. And it's a specialty drug because it's, for a rare disease. And so in our minds, before we had all the information, we thought like our insurance is not going to cover this. We're going to be in debt for the rest of our lives. We're never going to be able to own a house. We're never going to be, we're going to have to file for bankruptcy. Like, so our minds were spinning, before we had all the information, which is important to point out because, insurance did cover. There are other programs to help. There's Medicaid, which he was eligible for because he was in the hospital for more than 30 days for his bone marrow transplant. At least for Cincinnati Children's, there's a program called BCMH, and that helps with things that aren't covered by insurance. So there are a lot of programs in place to help families. But at the time, we did not know that. And so we were thinking he's going to have a $2-3 million procedure and we're never going to be able to afford life, basically. So at that time, JJ and I were living in a condo and we thought there's no way we're ever going to be able to afford this or buy a house. And so we moved into JJ's parents' house. And that was really hard, obviously. We had been married for several years already, living together. Like that's, taking a step back. And we're so grateful that they were able to do that for us and that they were able to support us in that way. But that was very hard, what we thought was, the start of our lives as a family was, taking a step backwards. And we were grieving what we thought, our future would look like. We were grieving Lincoln potentially never getting married or, not having grandkids. Like all of those things were going through our mind. So it was just very hard, especially me as, a new mother figuring out breastfeeding and like just all of that, just not being in your own space. It was very hard. But, at the time we thought like this is the only way right now that we're going to be able to afford anything because we're not going to be able to pay for rent. We're not going to be able to do all of this. So that was the only decision that we could really come up with at the time was moving in with his parents. I thankfully had 20 weeks of maternity leave through my job paid for. So
That's awesome.
Yes, which was great. And I remember when I was pregnant, it's like, oh my gosh, I get 5 months just with my baby, newborn snuggles and all that. And it's like, nope, you're going to spend that 20 weeks going to over 100 appointments and, living in the hospital for 6 weeks and all of that. But yeah, so I think it was like October 4th, I think was that first appointment. We met our bone marrow transplant doctor and she kind of went over how things go. We took a tour of the floor. Yeah, we started his enzyme replacement therapies. It was x-rays, echo, CT scan, blood work, you name it, everything was just crammed into, the next 10 weeks or so before we were admitted for bone marrow transplant. And I just remember another thing that was really hard was at one of his enzyme replacement therapy appointments, we had a fertility doctor come in and they were like, with chemo, he most likely is going to be infertile. There's a surgery we can do to basically remove like half of a testicle. And so maybe later on in life, we can use that tissue to make sperm so that he could have his own genetically, his own, children. It's like, what? Here we are just given a diagnosis that, people with MPS 1 are only living until they're 30. So it's like, why are we even having this conversation about kids? But then at the same time, it's like, what if there is a cure and he does live a full, long life and he does want kids? How do you make that decision for your newborn, not knowing, what they're going to want to do later in life? And we chose to not do that. It's an experimental procedure. So in 30 years, they may not even be able to do anything with that tissue. So it's putting him through another surgery. It's putting him through more pain for something that might not even work. But I think that's very hard for families to go through. It's like now you're grieving the possibility of them ever being able to have kids if they're even able to at that point. So yeah, just those first 10 weeks, just constantly keeping your eyes on your phone for my chart notification to see the tests. What's wrong with his heart? Is his spine normal? Are his hips normal? Just all of that. It's so hard.
Not heard another family talk about the tissue and the infertility, but that's something that is like staying in Ryan's mind, my husband, that he talks about a lot. And I do remember it vaguely. We chose not to because it was another surgery and we didn't know any MPS 1 patients and still don't that have been able to. So Kennedy was female, obviously, to be able to bear children. So even if she could, that she could carry them. And we chose not to, but I don't remember being asked for Lincoln, but maybe my Lincoln, maybe it's a trauma thing that I don't remember. That is another one of those things that people just don't realize all the decisions that we have had to make and go through, even just in the bone marrow transplant process. And that's when it was like signing more paperwork than your house. You're signing, you understand the mortality. You understand that this could cause cancer because, the chemo and all the toxins that they're getting and just all the different risks and everything. But like you said, I mean, it's the only option that's there. So it's almost like they're trying to talk you out of it. They're not, but, trying to talk you out of it. But also this is your only thing you can do. So that one thing for the world to hear that you had to make that choice is big.
Very hard. And it's just, we pray for a cure. We pray that, he is able to have children one day. It might not be biological, but we pray that he is able to make that decision, whether he wants to adopt. That's our hope, is that when the time comes, if he wants to have a family, that he is able to have a family. But that's a very hard decision to make. Like, how could you take that away from him if he wanted to have his own biological kids? But yeah, it's experimental. They couldn't guarantee that anything would come from it. It was just putting him through another surgery, and it's just,
So different places do it differently, and I really don't know anybody else that did a port. So I wanted to ask, when you started enzyme replacement therapy, did you all just do it through the vein every time until transplant?
Yeah, so we did just IV, and it was hard, but at the time, he's a newborn. He's not aware of what's going on. We just have to hold him down and let the nurse stick him. Now that he's older, he knows what's coming. It's very hard. But yeah, we just did IV placement. And then when we were admitted for his bone marrow transplant, it was December 14th that we went in. And then December 15th, he had surgery to get his central line placed. He got ear tubes to help with his hearing. He had a little ear tag externally that we had removed, not related to MPS 1. It was just something he was born with. And then they did an airway scope just to check his airways and kind of see what was going on with them. So that was on one surgery. And then I think they gave him 2 days of rest, and then we started chemo. So yeah, 9 days of chemo, 1 day of rest, and then bone marrow transplant. So yeah, we were there from December 14th until January 25th. So we spent his first Christmas in the hospital. We had a little tree for him and little ornaments, but that's not what you ever imagine your baby's first Christmas. You imagine it being surrounded by family, taking pictures and just, enjoying just your baby. And obviously they don't remember their first Christmas, but you remember it. And instead, we were in the hospital, and um yeah, his transplant was December 29th. So um
So a little bit about the transplant process, because when I hear you say I went inpatient December 14th and I was out January 25th, I'm like, man, that was fast. If
yes,
only I was in there those short days. But
yeah.
I've seen through your journey a little bit, it looks like you've experienced some other things. So tell us a little bit about the bone marrow transplant process and maybe some of the other things that you've been dealing with, if they were or were not transplant related,
Hmm.
and just maybe
Yeah.
a picture into that.
Yeah. So he had his transplant on December 29th, and the whole time he went through chemo, he was really happy and smiling. The effects didn't really take place until about 2 days after transplant. So it was New Year's Day, and he started having a really hard time breathing. Their place during transplant, they have monitors all over them. They have a pulse ox to check their oxygen. They have I don't know what they're called, leads or whatever to check their heart rate and all of that. And his oxygen was just, it would dip and then come back up and dip. And so they were, keeping a close eye on him, but um, eventually they're like, this is, he's getting down into the 70s and he's staying there for quite a while. So they put him on room air, just like the little, um, you know,
Cannula.
yeah, cannula. And we did that for a few hours, and it wasn't really helping. Like, he was gasping for air. And so they ended up sending us down to the PICU at like 10 p.m. on New Year's Day. Um, and it was just the most heartbreaking sight. When we got down, I'm holding him, they're wheeling me in a wheelchair. And you walk into the room, and I kid you not, there were 20 people in that room. There were doctors, there were therapists, there were nurses. Like, it was such an overwhelming, because it's the PICU. So they're thinking, this is an emergency. We have to help him right now. And that was the case. But like, as parents, we're like, oh my God, like, is he gonna die? Why are there 20 people in this room? He also was just breaking out in a huge rash all over his body. And so in my mind, I was like, GVHD, his body is denying this transplant, which at the time I didn't know. It was too early for that to even occur. It was just like a rash just from probably so many different people touching him that day. He was probably just sensitive to like perfume or, something that contacted his skin. But yeah, we were in the PICU. I had a full on panic attack. I had my own nurse helping me because I couldn't breathe. I was thinking like, he's gonna die. Like, his body's rejecting his transplant. He can't breathe. They're gonna have to intubate him. Like, all of the worst things were coming to my mind. And yeah, so it was like an entire week that he did not open his eyes. He was on high flow oxygen for maybe 2 or 3 days, and we were able to move back up to the bone marrow transplant floor. So we were only in the PICU for I think 3 days, but he was still on room air through the cannula. But his body was just fighting so hard from that transplant. The doctors kind of described it as like the worst bone pain you could ever think. Like, all of those cells are just, your body's trying to push out those cells. Um, and so, he's a little 3-month-old baby, and he's going through severe pain, and he doesn't understand it. And so his body was just fighting so hard, and it was just heartbreaking to see. But yeah, he wouldn't open his eyes for almost an entire week, and he was just pretty much lifeless. Like, it was a sight that no parent should ever have to see. But yeah, after about a week from post-transplant, he started improving. And um, I remember that first, they do rounds every morning. And we knew we were waiting on his engraftment test, his very first engraftment study. And I was so nervous. Like, I could not sleep. I was like, what if it shows like only 50% or something? And I remember, we had rounds and they're like, guess what engraftment he is? And it was 100%. So it was like the biggest relief of our life because his body was accepting it. He was starting to improve. He was no longer on air. So we're like, okay, we're gonna get through this. He's gonna make it. It's gonna be okay. Um, so yeah, and I remember that very first appointment back in October where we met his bone marrow transplant doctor for the very first time. She said, like, you're gonna be there for a minimum of 6 weeks. Like 6 weeks to the day is what we were there for. So we're very grateful for that because I know a lot of families stayed there for months and months and months. And a lot of families don't live 30 minutes from the hospital. So when they're technically discharged from the hospital, they have to go and stay at Ronald McDonald. But we were able to go home since we lived so close. So it was really a blessing that we were able to be there for 6 weeks. And the 6 weeks felt like a day and it felt like a year all at the same time. Time doesn't exist when you're in the hospital. It's really crazy. But yeah, we made it through and it hasn't been easy since necessarily, but that was definitely the hardest thing we've ever gone through. And we're just grateful that Lincoln will never remember it.
Yeah.
And I think something else that maybe people don't realize is they're on pain meds, like heavy pain meds, because the chemo, the bone marrow transplant, the pain that they're in is so severe. I mean, he was hooked up to a continuous pump of morphine. He had oxy, he had ketamine like around the clock. And so he was literally addicted to opioids. And we had to wean him from that because when we started to wean him from it like a little faster, he was having withdrawal symptoms. And it's like just something, it's like not even related to, MPS 1. It's just related to chemo and a bone marrow transplant. So yeah, that's really hard. And that was really the only thing after about 5 weeks or so of being in the hospital, that was the only thing that was really keeping us there was just he had to, get himself off of the continuous pain meds because they're not going to send us home on, morphine and all of those heavy drugs. So yeah, it's just really crazy that like a 3-month-old baby is addicted to, all of these heavy drugs, but that's just the pain and everything that they have to go through is just too much for them to handle. But yeah, we went home and, you're not home though. You're, in the hospital like every other day. So yeah, clinic appointments multiple times a week, physical therapy, occupational therapy pretty much started right after we were out of the hospital because, he's only 3 months old, but he pretty much spent an entire life just laying on his, or an entire month of his life just laying on his back. So, we had to get his strength up and all of that. So yeah, it was several appointments a week. And, he had a central line. So before we could leave the hospital, they had to train us on, how to do that. But yeah, people don't realize, I think, that you're also kind of trained to be a nurse at the same time. You're responsible for cleaning the line, flushing the line with heparin, with saline, making sure it's always covered. It's very time sensitive too. So you have to, do it at the same time every day so it doesn't get like clogged with clots. It's just a lot. It's a full-time job. And so yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think only a few hours, or not a few hours. It's Monday. A few weeks after transplant, we were just in for one of his clinic appointments, and they saw that his sodium was really low. And we had a nephrologist come in, and they're like, "Yeah, this isn't good. Low sodium can cause seizures. We're not really sure why his sodium is low. We need to admit you guys." So we were back in the hospital for an entire week, kind of just playing like a guessing game, like what is, causing this. So he had an echo, he had another head CT, a bunch of tests, and essentially the drug cyclosporin, that our kids take, it's an anti-rejection med, so that their bodies like don't reject the transplant. It was causing his kidneys to just not fail, but it really impacted his kidneys to where, his sodium was all over the place. But you can't just not take cyclosporin. That's just a non-negotiable. You have to take that. So then we were, having to give him salt water. Literally, it was just salt water through his mouth every day, 3 times a day, on top of like the 9 other meds that you're sent home with. So yeah, he had low sodium for, gosh, several months. But I mean, with the meds, like the oral saline, it would go back up. But it took, I think, until September to finally wean him off of that, to where his kidneys were strong enough to, produce whatever. Yeah, so we were admitted for a full week in February. We were admitted, I don't know, in March, maybe for 3 days, just from his sodium. Yeah, just his kidneys were kind of all over the place. But with that, they're like, we need to make sure it's not like a physical thing. So he had kidney ultrasounds. He had different scans where like they watched the renal pelvises drain, like see how fast it could go. And it showed that he had like a clog or some sort of like anatomy was weird. So we were thinking maybe he needed kidney surgery, which at the time that kind of was a maybe from the doctors. But then he met with a urologist and they're like, no, we think this really is just due to the medication and that things will get better. So that was sometime in the summer. And then in August, I was like, he has a hernia. Like, I know it. It was like in the groin area. He was just, whenever he cried or like exerted force, like you could just see it. And so I told, his doctors, like, he's got a hernia. I know this is very common in MPS 1. So they did an ultrasound. And I guess the hernia was too small at the time and it would like go back in because they said, like, we don't see anything. And so there's nothing there. Yeah. And so we went back home and, whenever that bulge was there, I would just say like, well, they didn't see anything. Like maybe this is just him. Maybe this is just what he looks like. Like this is just his anatomy. It might be a little weird, but I guess there's nothing wrong. But it was so crazy. And so, yeah, September rolls around. He turns 1. I think September like 20th-ish was when we finally got off all of his medications. But yeah, so things were slowing down. The appointments were now like 2 times a week. Things were starting to kind of like be normal-ish. And then one day in November, he was just screaming in pain, like grabbing his diaper area, like inconsolable. He's not like that at all. And so we took him to the emergency room and they did an ultrasound. They're like, yep, that's a hernia for sure. And at the time, like they weren't able to get it back in. So they were like, we're going to get him into like, this is an emergency surgery. Like we're going tonight.
Be 2 months.
Yeah. Finally, another doctor came in and was able to get it back in. And so it was no longer like an emergency surgery, but it was like, you need to get surgery in the next few days. So that was again a Friday night.
Always.
And always a Friday night, like late at like 9 p.m. And so, yeah, we were admitted to the bone marrow transplant floor because pretty much even if it's not transplant related, like once you've had a bone marrow transplant, that's your home. So we were there just hanging out, for a few days. And then Monday morning he had a hernia surgery. And they were like, there might be 2, there might just be 1. We're just going to repair the one that we know for sure is there. So yeah, he had his hernia surgery. very quick recovery. These kids are so resilient. It's insane. But yeah, he was like crawling around within like a day. Um, and then not even a week later, oh, we saw the other one. So, yep,
Oh my
he
God.
had to, yeah, he had to, but there was no way for them to like know for sure because the other one was so big that that's like all they could see. But once that one was like patched up, now the other hernia is going out the other side.
Oh my
So,
God.
but it was still like not big enough where it was like constantly sticking out. So I was like, during one of his clinic appointments, I was like, there's another hernia here. You can't see it right now. Like you couldn't see it last time, but it's there. And I know it's there. Um, and so they ended up just sending us down to the emergency room from clinic because they're like, they're gonna have to, even to do a surgery, like they're gonna have to, just go through that process. So we went down there. Um, and because it wasn't like popping out like constantly, we had to like make him scream to like exert that force to show. And so we had to just make him really upset because that was the only way the ultrasound could prove like there was another hernia. But yeah, since it was much smaller than the other one, it wasn't like an emergency thing. And so we scheduled surgery, and the earliest they could get him in was like January 3rd or something, which was like a month and a half out, which I was really nervous about. I was like, just knowing how the other one went, like it's not gonna work. So yeah, sometime in the middle of December, the same thing happened. It got to the point where it was not going back in. It was hurting him so badly. So we took him to the emergency room, and they were able to do surgery again on the second side. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And usually those types of surgeries are outpatient, but just because of hurlers and anesthesia being a risk and just all of that, they just wanted to, monitor him. So we were there for a couple days each time. So yeah. Oh, and then another thing I forgot to bring up was, I don't know, maybe 3 months after transplant, he's just having normal baby teething, but he caught a fever from it. But he has a central line, so anytime you have a fever, you have to go in because they have to draw cultures and make sure there's not an infection in the blood. So we were admitted there for like 3 days. That was also a Friday night at like 9 or 10 p.m. Um, so yeah, it ended up being nothing. Nothing came up on his test. There was no virus, there was no bacterial infection. It was literally just a 4-month-old baby teething. But you can't risk it. So
Yeah. That is what's
so yeah.
frustrating. How did he you were talking about giving him that salt water and the meds. Did he have an NG tube or he fed through
So
everything?
yeah, so he was like exclusively breastfed until, well, his whole life. And then they told me like, during transplant, a lot of these babies, because of chemo and just the mucositis, like a lot of them do not continue to breastfeed during transplant. And then they get to the point where they don't even either remember how or they're not interested in it anymore. But he continued to breastfeed during transplant. There was like maybe 2 days right after transplant where he, was so sick when we were in the PICU that he just could not eat anymore. And that was heartbreaking for me because that was like the one like connection I had with him where like all of my worries melted away. It was just like I was, nothing else mattered. I was just there with him, nurturing him, comforting him. Like that was his safe place. And so it was my safe place. So thinking that he was never going to nurse again was so heartbreaking. But 2 days later, he came in, a lactation like consultant came in, and they kind of like looked at him like because he wasn't latching, and he wasn't doing it at all on his own. But then the second they come in, he just started, breastfeeding again. So yeah, there was really only those 2 days where he didn't, and then he continued on. But since, a lot of babies don't continue to breastfeed, they did put an NG tube in, I think, a day before transplant, just anticipating him needing it. Um,
Really?
yeah. And so he did have an NG tube for maybe 4 weeks or so, because he was not taking the oral meds very good. And so we were able to put the oral meds through his NG tube. We went home on the NG tube, not for feeding or anything like that. It was just for the meds. But we were like so sick of it. It was terrible. Since he didn't need it for feeding, we really wanted to get rid of it. So they allowed us to do like a full week trial with, just giving him oral meds, but keeping the NG tube in just to make sure, like, if we needed it, it was there. But he did fine a whole week with, taking the meds. It was a fight every single time. Like,
wow, but he's a champ.
absolutely screaming. He would like spit it out and we would like catch it in our hands and like put it back in his mouth. It was a whole thing. Like 3 times a day, you're having to give these meds. He had like a special playlist that like the songs like helped calm him down a little bit. But yeah, it was a lot, but it was so much better than having the NG tube. So yeah, he had that for about 4 weeks or so, and then we were done with it. But yeah, he continued breastfeeding for, 16 months or so.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I think another thing is, I don't know if it's all, kids that go through transplant, but he definitely was delayed in like eating solids. I don't know if it was a sensory thing, when he had mucositis and all that, but we had, he was just not able to eat solids for a very, very long time. So we were seeing a speech therapist for a while, and it was only until very recently, like maybe when he was 15, 16 months old, he really started like doing better with them, but we were still relying on like purees and all of that. So yeah, just recently he's been eating, full solid foods. But yeah, those are just so many like extra side effects of everything.
Oh, it's like even the hernia, the eating stuff, people don't talk about a lot because it's not, I guess,
It's not
life or death. Yeah. But I think everybody goes through it. I know for sure. I remember Lincoln, I think my trauma brain fogs out Kennedy some, but I know the pouches. He probably ate pouches till he was 2.5 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, he would eat some other stuff, but he always wanted a pouch. It was hard to get past that. And the same, trying to get him to eat. And I do remember it with Kennedy. I don't feel like hers was as bad as his, but the whole trying to get them to eat again after transplant was a struggle. So I think that's a whole
really hard.
Yeah, I see it in the group a lot, and questions about the hernias. I think most MPS 1 kids have hernias. Just it's the minimal thing we have to worry about.
Yeah.
So nobody says anything. So it's crazy. You talking about you going in for the hernia, and then not being able to see anything, and just kind of going back to that mama instinct. I mean, it's so real.
I knew it was there.
Yeah. And that's one of those that I try to tell all the people, but it's so hard when, and not just that, but all the things going through transplant and just being in the hospital, like, your baby best, but it's so hard because especially in those first years or months, years, the doctor kind of acts like, they know everything. And so it's hard to push back and be heard. And because even you said, you went back and you're like, they said there was nothing wrong. Like, that is so hard. But time and time again, like, you're right. Like, the mom instinct is so real. And so that's one thing I try to push people. Like, I know you get pushed back and it's hard. A lot of doctors are intimidating and they want to be the know-it-all, but you are the expert in your child. It happens over and over. And so for you to remember that one and say it, I'm like, yes, mom knows best.
No, it's and I could not say enough good things about our bone marrow transplant doctor. She is phenomenal. I love her. And she always trusts us. She always trusts us, and she will always listen to us. It's more of like the other doctors that aren't, familiar with MPS 1, but they have to do, just a general surgeon who's doing the hernias or, all of that. And then of course we advocate for neuromonitoring for these little surgeries. And they're like, neuromonitoring, are you serious? Like, they're not getting, an 8-hour spinal surgery, but they don't understand that, like, no, this is really important. So I fought for it, and they basically came back the morning of surgery and were like, it's going to be less than an hour. He doesn't need it. But I was like, okay, as long as it's less than an hour, if you can guarantee me it's going to be less than an hour, I'm okay with it. But if it's over 60 minutes, he's getting it. Yeah. So that's, really, really important for families to advocate, for their children. But yeah, it's a lot.
We talk about neuromonitoring a lot because we have seen the repercussions, and we have seen we're friends with the kids who happened, and this is the reason why we have it. But again, to know that you were at Cincinnati Children's, who is kind of a center of excellence for MPS 1, and they know about MPS 1, and you're still having to advocate for it, is so hard. I think about the parents that are at, just their local hospital or somewhere where they can't go to a center of excellence, and they are getting that pushback. And how do you, telling them to say surgery's called off, like walk away. It's very overwhelming for some people, but it is so true. And you are your child's voice. You are your child's advocate. You are the expert. And like you said, we've had to learn to be an expert in all the things, even being a nurse. I mean, there is so much, and it's so overwhelming, but get connected, get educated. I don't know if that's one reason we do this. It's just knowledge. You only know what you know. And like I said, a lot of it's just life experiences. It's not even what a doctor's told you or, anything like that. So every story helps the next person. Every tip helps the next person. I know it's really hard to be vulnerable, and I know it's really hard for some people to tell their story. And when you're sitting there, like I said, I've been there, like, why am I doing this? Why am I telling my story? But every time I've talked to the next person I'm going to podcast or the next mom, they're like, well, I heard this from so-and-so or during this story. And so it's just the 6 degrees of separation and the knowledge that you can spread when you share your story. So you talked about the anxiety and the overwhelm and the emotional and all of that. Was your husband able to stay with you, like in the hospital during transplant? Somebody was able to be with you?
Yeah. So I mean, Lincoln's our only child. So, JJ was with me every single night. He never left. He's never missed an appointment. Like, we do all of it together. And I'm so grateful for that because, even the regular clinic appointments where you're expecting nothing, like something can always come up on blood work, on, anything. And so just, having him there is really, a blessing. And he wouldn't have it any other way either. He wants to be there. He wants to be involved. We definitely cope with anxiety and fear very differently. He seems to bury it a lot more and just kind of like, he'll just brush it off until he can, deal with it by himself at 2 a.m. in the morning, whatever, where I'm very like, when I get anxious, you can tell I'm anxious. So yeah, but we kind of balance each other out in that aspect. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if, we had another child, who knows if he would have been able to be there, the whole time. But yeah, it's still to this day, we do all the appointments together. And yeah, his work was, he's able to work fully remote during that year. Because his job was already like a hybrid role. So they just, allowed him to be fully remote for that first year after transplant.
I may be asking too much here, but you mentioned that you take medication. Is there any kind of therapy or anything that you do that you're just like, I should tell the next person about, or something that has changed your life and your emotional well-being and just helping you cope?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is just a Cincinnati Children's thing or if it's a national thing, but there is a fund or something. It's called like the caregivers. I don't know the exact word for it, but essentially, if your child is inpatient at Cincinnati Children's, you get therapy for free. They have therapists there just to support parents. They're also there, of course, for the patients, if the patients need therapy to talk through whatever. But before transplant, during transplant, after transplant, we had, weekly appointments. We had different therapists. So we were seeing, our therapists individually, but different. So there wasn't like a conflict of interest or anything. But once a week, we were able to, step out of the room and go talk to a therapist, for a lot of those beginning conversations. It was a lot about just grief and how do you handle not knowing how long your child has? How do you handle um, just the fear of like everything that comes with MPS one? And it's kind of cool to see like how, things change with time. You know, when we were outpatient and just he had clinic appointments every Friday, we would also have our therapy appointments. So one of us would step out and, do our therapy appointments. And it kind of went from, grieving to celebrating, the milestones that we've met and just like being so excited to tell our therapist like he crawled for the first time and just like all of those things. And yes, we still have those anxieties and fears, but they're not as heavy. And so it was kind of then just moving to working towards desensitizing the trauma, I guess. Because it is very traumatic. I was like officially diagnosed with PTSD through that experience, and some things just trigger me so hard. It's really weird. And like, during those additional admissions where you're back on the bone marrow transplant floor, you think that it would be a super like traumatic thing being there. But for me, it wasn't. It was a very calming situation because I think like during transplant, when he was as sick as could be, like the doctors and nurses were there and they took care of him and they took care of us and he got through the other side. So when we were there for those other admissions for like much less serious things where we knew he was going to be okay, it was just kind of like monitoring him or just like doing additional tests and stuff. It was just kind of like a place of calm for me. But yeah, I remember during transplant, the week after transplant, where he was like the sickest, was not opening his eyes. Like he basically was just laying there, like, what else do you do but, watch TV. So JJ and I were watching a show called Daisy Jones and the Six, and it was like a music kind of show. And so we were listening to that or watching that a week after transplant. And then like months later, I was driving home from work and one of the songs came on and it triggered something in me. Like I had to pull over. I felt immense like anxiety. Like it took me back to transplant. So yeah, it's just things like that. It's just like a song, a smell, like anything can really trigger you and send you back. So yeah, the therapy really helped though to kind of recognize like, oh, you really do have, trauma associated with this and we're going to work through it. And we did that. And, it's still a very traumatic thing, like thinking back to diagnosis day, thinking back to, transplant. But, 6 months ago, I don't think I could be here talking about it, but I am now. And so that's the biggest thing. It's like, time does help. It doesn't heal everything, but it does definitely help. And I just remember, myself that, first week after diagnosis, like not even thinking I would be able to survive. And now I'm here. And that's why I hope I can be, a voice of comfort for a newly diagnosed family. That's why I am posting about MPS 1 on our social media. That's why I am wearing t-shirts and talking about it all the time because, you never know if a newly diagnosed family is going to look up MPS 1 and our page comes up and then they reach out to me and I'm able to offer support. Like that's what I want. I want to be able to be that for someone because, that's what you were for me when we were, newly diagnosed. So yeah. And
Also,
with awareness, comes a cure, as we always say.
exactly what
So,
my mind was saying.
yep.
Yeah, it does. So right now he was diagnosed as a newborn. We I have to think what it is right now. It is April of 2025. So he is how old now?
He's 18 months. He'll be 19 months. Well, what day is today? The 7th? He'll be 18 or 19 months tomorrow.
Oh.
Yep. So yeah, he'll be 19 months. He just started walking independently, like about a week ago, which is amazing because, that's late, almost 19 months old. That's a late walker. But when you look at everything he's gone through, it's like he's doing things on his own time, and that is completely fine.
Yeah.
He's not a normal baby. he's doing things exactly the timing that he needs to. And it's just so fun. It's such a fun age. And we're finally like on every 3-month appointments. It was like twice a week and then once a week and then once every other week and then once a month. And it was just like, it was constant appointments, but we just finished like our monthly appointments. And so now it's a 3-month gap and it's just amazing.
It is.
It's crazy. And like he still has therapy every week, but that's kind of like a fun like playtime. We're just playing with the therapist. So, we're just working on walking and strength and stuff. It's not blood draws, it's not getting poked. So yeah,
Do they
it's
come to
just
you?
really nice. They did come to us monthly or weekly, both OT, speech, and PT until 2 weeks ago. He had his very first outpatient. He graduated from OT and he graduated from speech because he's eating so well now. So now he's just on PT and we just had our very first outpatient. But it's really good because now we're at a point where he can be out and about and we don't have to worry about him like catching anything because he's not on cyclosporin anymore. He's had his first couple rounds of vaccinations. His immune system is very strong. And so we're able to take him, and there's just so many more things that he can do there. They have, different things he can climb on, just different toys. So being in a different environment definitely, I think, is going to help a lot, kind of take him to the next step of like fully being confident walking and everything.
Yeah. Are you all in and I only know because we went to Cincinnati Children's and we have something similar here in Tennessee called Tennessee Early Intervention Services, I think. And I think Ohio's was First Steps. Are you all a part of that?
It's called like Watch Me Grow
Yeah.
or something like that. So they did actually, that was the call I was waiting for when he was 7 days old. Because they were just going to sign us up for that because of his hearing loss. And so then when we got the call for MPS 1, that was like, I'm not even worrying about this right now. We never officially signed up for it just because we were getting all of his therapies through Cincinnati Children's and our insurance does cover them. So we didn't need like additional assistance with that, but it is a great program where if your insurance does not pick up, therapy appointments, they do offer that for free. I think for like the first 3 years of life. They'll come out, I believe, once a month or maybe even more often than that, but they will come out and they do offer those services. So yeah, that was definitely offered to us and we always meant to sign up for it, but because he is getting weekly therapies, it's just like an additional person coming to our house that he's not familiar with. Like it, I don't think it was going to do much for him at that point, but yeah.
Yeah. It helped us we continued therapy through it and it helped us transition as we were like going into school and stuff. Like once he got in, or my kids got into pre-K more, I don't really remember Kennedy doing pre-K with it, but I feel like Lincoln did. And then, like I said, once they turned 3, turned into like getting into the IEPs and the pre-K stuff. I don't know. I don't remember. But yes, I don't know if all states have that, but I did want to bring that up because that is a good service that a lot of people don't know about. And we have a waiver program now in Tennessee called the Katie Beckett waiver. And that's been huge for families like us that don't qualify for disability or Social Security, but to be able to fund some other things like the wheelchair. Insurance will pay for the wheelchair, but not for the stroller or vice versa.
Yeah. And I think another thing is, at least at Cincinnati Children's, I'm sure they're at every hospital. There are like financial counselors, advisors, people that will contact your insurance for you. It's crazy how many denials we have gotten for his enzyme therapy replacement, denial saying it's not medically necessary. It's like, this is literally his disease. He does not have this enzyme. This is the reason why he needs this. So yeah, it's in the beginning we thought like it's going to be a full-time job fighting insurance, but there are people there to do that for you. It's their job. They've been great. They set us up with everything we need. Even his hernia surgery, they said not medically necessary. It's like, excuse me, because traditionally it's an outpatient surgery, and so they're like, why are you staying here for 2 to 3 days overnight? Like, that is not necessary. But they don't understand the complexity of why we have to stay overnight. Yeah, like, it's a lot more than just a simple hernia surgery. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating, seeing constant denial after denial. That doesn't mean we're responsible, for, what they don't cover, because again, there's people fighting those. You just appeal, you do, whatever you need to do. But it's definitely frustrating. Insurance does not understand, what our kids go through. And I would say probably more than half the doctors in the United States have never even heard of MPS 1. So it's hard, because you want everyone to know what your child's going through, so we can bring awareness and better treatment options and a cure.
So you're a world of knowledge. You have done a great job. I'm so surprised, just because I feel like a lot of the newer families are, brain fogged by the transplant, the diagnosis, and all the things, and you're just now getting into that normal phase, whatever normal is for MPS 1 patients. But you covered, the emotional well-being. You covered like the misconception. That's one thing I ask a lot about, and the process and the resources. And so you've done a really good job through the whole thing, being a world of knowledge. So I hope people will reach out to you. Is the best if they found you on Facebook, they would just look up your name, or how would?
My name, Emma Mizer, is my Facebook. My Instagram, I think, is Emma.Mizer. Yeah. And, I just want to be there for anyone. And it is really crazy you say that, like the brain fog, because there are some things I don't remember at all. But I could tell you, like, if I saw our nurse, like one of our nurses that we had for one day during transplant, like at like the store, I would know her name. I remember what color their scrub pants were. Crazy things. Where JJ's like, what? Like, how do you even remember that stuff? So it's just very weird what your brain picks up on. But maybe that was me just like survival mode. Like, that was the only thing that, could get me through transplant, was being hyper fixated on things that didn't matter. But yeah, it's quite wild.
Let's talk about, that is some things I want to ask you. Just talk about her scrub pants, things that seem irrelevant and may seem irrelevant to you, but it could help the next person. So what are 3 to 5 things? We'll start with 3 things that maybe it's an item that's a must-have, or a tip that you picked up on how to swaddle the baby, during meds, or just anything. It could be anything. It could be the water bottle you use. What's your favorite water bottle? Because again, somebody hears something, they're like, oh my God, I wish I would have thought about that 6 months ago. It would have really helped my life.
Yeah, I mean, so for sure, I'm sure every single person says this, but you need a foam topper for the pull-out bed. That's like the only thing that will save you when you're sleeping. I know, like with the central line and constantly being hooked up to IVs and stuff, they say like button onesies, so that the lines can fit through. But actually, you can also do the 2-way zipper ones, because you can have the zippers like at any point along. And so you can have the lines going out through by the foot. And so you don't need buttons. You just need 2-way zippers. And there are actually a lot of brands that have 2-way zippers, like Carter's, the newer Burt's Bees ones. So yeah, those are really good, because I was not a fan of buttons, or like the snaps. I mean, not necessarily buttons, but the snaps. So yeah, I really liked the 2-way zipper onesies. Anything that feels like home. You can't bring your whole entire house with you, but we were there for Christmas, so we had a little Christmas tree for him. We had a little advent calendar. We decorated. We just tried to make it feel like home. And I don't know, I think another thing that maybe not bring with you, but a good piece of advice that, maybe halfway through our stay there was like, take 20 minutes and just go in the bathroom and just sit in the shower. Just sit on the stool, just let the water run over you, and just like zone out. Even if it's just for 20 minutes a day, just take time for yourself. We were so afraid of catching anything. So we pretty much stayed in our hospital room for the entire 6 weeks, other than, going out to get, something from the cafeteria. Of course, we were masked the whole time, but I think there was like 3 weeks where I didn't even step outside one time. So, you have to take care of yourself too, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't be your best self for your children. Um, so yeah, that for sure. And yeah, anything that the baby will keep them occupied. It's hard for them. Toys, books. Um, I will say I didn't know this at the time, but Child Life, I'm sure, is at every hospital. They have every book and every toy you could possibly think of. So yes, bring what is your child's favorite, but don't bring like everything that they have, because, those Child Life is there for you. Um, yeah, they're there for whatever you need. You ask and they will bring it to you. Um, yeah, that's all I can think of right now, but
Those are good ones. I even forgot about
probably an
the
eye
comfort.
mask, and earplugs for sure. Um, yeah, I remember it was like, I don't know, maybe December 23rd. I remember the dates, but I got so anxious. I broke out in hives, like the worst hives you've ever seen in your life. And I had to take myself to urgent care because, we're at a children's hospital. So of course, like they can't prescribe you anything. Um, so I was terrified because my child is going through chemo right now and going through, a transplant, and I cannot catch anything, but I had to go to urgent care to get steroids for myself. Just the sheer anxiety of going into transplant, like my body like reacted so poorly. So yeah, that's just take care of yourself is all I can say. Just talk to people, find support. I brought like a coloring book, like just those, you know, the really like intricate little pictures that you can just color like really small details just to focus your mind just for a little bit. Just, take away from everything. But yeah, it's a hard time, but we all survive, and you just get through it, and you just have to be there. Um, yeah, I never thought I would survive it, but we did.
You did. You
Yeah.
did. Look at you now. And I think I mean, I'm sure there are some that don't, but every mom that I know that has been through this has anxiety.
Yeah.
It
How can
changes
you
your
not?
life. Yeah.
It changes you.
I didn't really have it. I don't remember having it really before this, but going in, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm anxiety ridden, and it
Yeah.
makes you a micromanager because the mom instincts, you see things
Yeah.
happening before you and nobody's listening, and you're like,
Yeah.
I told you, like I knew how this was
Hmm.
going to turn out. So you're not alone, and you said ask for help and reach out and take care of yourself. I think for a lot of newly diagnosed families, that's really hard. They
Hmm.
don't want to get connected, and they don't want to reach out. And I don't know
Yeah.
how to encourage people to put their toes in, because I have heard, and I
Yeah.
do understand time and time again. I don't really know if I encourage people to be in the groups, because again, you're grieving
Yeah.
things that you don't know that you'll ever have to grieve, but how
Yeah.
to get some information or feel confident enough to ask your question, and then receive what you can, and then just pick it through
Yeah.
there and make the best decision for your family. Because
Yeah.
like you said, it's all education and knowledge and the life
Yeah.
experiences. You only know what you know, whether it's an item that's going to help you, or whether it's a center of excellence, or whether it's neuromonitoring. And neuromonitoring is huge, and still not every hospital says it is, but we know it is. So it's
Yeah.
all real, for sure.
Yeah. I will say, early on, I did join the MPS one Facebook group. Bad idea. It's for every, there are moms and dads and grandmas and aunts and uncles that are on it for people that have MPS one back in the 1980s, where they didn't have enzymes, they didn't have, transplant. And, you're just seeing so much, and like it's a great resource, but at the same time it was just too much for me at the time, being a newly diagnosed mom, um because you're seeing all of these things, like people are asking for advice for surgeries and like all this, and it's just like I'm not ready to see that. um but your site and just reaching out to individuals, I think, is what helps me the most. Other moms, not necessarily like big groups. um but I'm technically a member of it, but I have it hidden so that like when I'm on Facebook, like nothing pops up. I have to actually go into the page to like be in it.
That's a
um
good idea.
yes, like I'm a member of the group, but no post will ever pop up on my feed unless if I actually like type in, and go to the page. Um, but I think it's just so important, like just because, someone else went through something doesn't mean your child is going to. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like every single child experiences MPS 1 differently. Everyone goes through transplant differently. Yes, there's a lot of the same things, like a lot of hip surgeries, a lot of, spine surgeries, a lot of hernia surgeries, all of that. But at the end of the day, your child is their own individual, and they might not face, those, same things. And I mean, it best, having Kennedy, who was not diagnosed as a newborn, and then having Lincoln, who was diagnosed as a newborn. There's vast differences. Um, and there's just not, newborn screening is so new that there are adults that were newborn screened. And so I can't assume that his life is going to be limited to 30 years. I can't assume that he's going to have all of these same issues that, other MPS 1 teenagers and adults have. Um, it's every child is different. Every child is, it going to experience things differently. And, like, for example, Lincoln's hips so far appear to be shallow, but his spine is as straight as can be. He does not have a gibbous at all. He doesn't even have like a little curve. Like, it is a completely normal spine, and we pray that it stays that way. But of course, that's a huge, scary surgery. And, when you're newly diagnosed, like, of course, we thought, oh, he's going to need a spine surgery, but maybe not. He might not, because his spine as of now is completely straight, and he's continuing to grow, and it's not changing. But his hips are shallow, so he might need hip surgery. So yeah, you just have to take it day by day, and when things come up, you just do the best you can. And I told JJ, if he does need hip surgery, we're probably going to go to Minnesota or Nemours and get, multiple opinions. Cincinnati was absolutely amazing for transplant. I wouldn't necessarily, do big orthopedic surgeries there, I don't think. But I wouldn't have known that, though, if it weren't for talking to other families and being in those groups. So I think it's really important to get connected. And, if a big group is too overwhelming, like it was for me, it's okay. Just reach out to individuals. Even if it's just one mom, it's at least one connection. They've lived through it. They've experienced it. And like, yes, I'm a new MPS 1 mom. Lincoln's only almost 19 months old, but I've been through transplant, and I've been through a lot of those initial, screenings and tests and everything. And so I can at least help with navigating the newly diagnosed life. So yeah, I just want to be there for whoever needs it.
And never be afraid to ask. When you were talking about talking to other moms, even in the specialty, even in the hip doctors, I encourage people to get that second opinion, get that third opinion. Don't be afraid, and you will be able to know where you're supposed to be. You don't have to take somebody else's opinion or just feel like you're making the right decision, because it all works out. Once you get in there, you know where you're being called to be.
Yeah. And I mean, there are even programs like, we're a part of the MPS Society, and so we get like their quarterly like magazines or whatever. And I was reading recently, like, they even have a program that will pay for your travel to go get a second opinion. So, Minnesota is out of state, Nemours in Delaware is out of state. We would have to fly to those locations, but there's assistance available to get those second opinions. So don't feel like you have to go to the hospital of your hometown, or like and insurance, of course, you're going to have to fight insurance to go out of state, and that's a whole thing. But at the end of the day, and I say it all the time, I would fly to Australia, I would fly to Japan. Like, I'm going to go to the best for my child, and that's just what you do, and you figure it out. If you have to slap me with a $2 million bill, okay, we'll fundraise. We'll do payment plans. Like, we'll do whatever we need to do. I don't care.
Love it.
We're going to do what's best for our baby. So
It all works out. I'm going to ask you one final question, which I feel like, again, you've covered it, through the whole thing. You've been so encouraging. But what does Rising Up Rare mean to you?
wow. Yeah, it means just being proud. It's so weird because like when we were first diagnosed, like there was almost a shame associated with it. Like, how is my baby sick? Like, why us? Almost afraid to tell like your friends and your family like there's something wrong with your baby. But that's just not the case at all. They are beautifully unique and rare. But I mean, oh my gosh, Lincoln is so smart and so funny. He does things that just absolutely crack us up, and he knows that he's being funny and he continues to do it. His personality is just shining through recently. He's so lively, and it's amazing to see. And he is worthy, just like all of these kids, they are worthy of advancements in, research. Just because they're rare, it doesn't mean that they don't deserve a cure. Just because there's not, 100,000, people living with MPS 1 doesn't mean that there shouldn't be people researching it, that there shouldn't be government funding. But it often does take the moms and dads and the families doing fundraisers and raising awareness for anything to happen. So we have to kind of take it among ourselves to do that. But being an advocate is never something, I thought I would have to be. You never think that your child is going to be sick. You never think that your child is going to have a terminal disease, but you do what you can. And now I'm at the point where, we're through transplant and he's doing so well that I want to be as loud as I can. And I want, to show the world, like, look at him. He is full of life. He is smiling. He's laughing constantly. He's so smart. He's learning every day. Like, he deserves to live a full life, pain-free and happy. He deserves to do whatever he wants to do in this life. And I don't want to ever limit him, but there also are things that, like, he might not be able to play contact sports or something, but if he has a huge interest in sports, then we're going to do whatever we can to nurture that. Like, take him to games, get him into like broadcasting or like just something where he can still be so involved in his interests. And we're just going to do whatever we can, to nurture that. But yeah, Rising Up Rare, it's just being proud and loud and, being advocates for your kids. And like you say, the 6 points of separation, like, you might know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and they might donate a huge check. And that allows families to come together, to be together, or it allows another clinical trial to happen. So yeah, it's hard talking about your story, and it's hard being vulnerable, but you have to. For families that aren't ready to speak up or don't feel comfortable, I don't blame you. And we're not like ashamed or anything, because it is so hard and it's not for everyone. And like I said, I never thought I would be an advocate or have to, but you just kind of roll with it. I don't know if I'm doing it all correctly, if I'm doing enough. You never know. Like, should I have, a separate Facebook page for just MPS 1? Like, should I be, hosting a fundraiser locally? Like, you never know if you're doing enough, but you just have to do what you feel is enough at the time.
Yeah.
And just, you get involved in whatever that looks like.
Everything makes a difference. So you're doing it perfectly. I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored that you said yes. And I'm so honored that you reached out to me. You're doing a great job. I can remember being in those shoes for sure. Yeah. Even though my story is a little bit different, it feels all so much the same. And it really just makes me so proud that you're here. The squeaky wheel truly gets the oil even in this situation. And so like
Yeah.
you said, everything matters, even if it's just getting on and doing a podcast, or if it's just making one post, or maybe to you, it is waking up and getting out of bed and feeding your baby that day. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
so small. It's just the next step forward. You have to take one step forward. So I'm so thankful to have you today. This has been a long time coming. You know that
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of chaos, and I'm so excited that I'm going to get to be with Lincoln in person. The
Yes,
Kennedy
we're
Ladd
so
Foundation
excited.
is having the 5th annual Run for Awareness and Win for a Cure, where last year we had 13 MPS families, and I think this year we're going to have over 20. So it's
Yeah.
chaos here, logistically planning everything, but the excitement as I've talked to people, and I really feel like half the people have never met another family.
Yeah.
And we do have some younger people on this year. Some younger people signed up. So still trying to figure that out too. I'm like, what do I do for the smaller kids?
Yeah.
But I'm so excited for you all to get to meet each other and just talk.
Yeah.
And,
It's a big deal for us too, because I mean, you're in isolation for essentially an entire year after transplant. It's like more severe than COVID. You really don't leave your house. Like, our doctor even told us, taking him on a walk around the neighborhood after transplant, he had to be like in a bubble, like one of those plastic covers, even just outside. So this is really the first like trip we'll be taking as a family ever. And we're just so excited to meet other families where you literally do not have to explain a single thing. They know your story, they know what you've been through, and you can just go and be together and watch your kids play together and see everyone come together to support you. And yeah, we're so excited.
Oh. Well, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in May. I will try to post your contact down in the show notes. I'm bad about that sometimes.
Yes.
But I will try to post it. So if anybody is a newly diagnosed family, or maybe you're a family member and you just want to ask some questions, Emma is open to you messaging her and just giving you hope and just being an ear to listen, or maybe give you some direction. So reach out to somebody, ask for help. We thank you for being here today, and we can't wait for you to find hope and just to take the next step, because that's what it takes. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on Rising Up Rare. Our mission is to shine a light on the entire rare disease community, because no matter the diagnosis, each of us have something valuable to share that can bring hope and create change. As a mom, it's my mission to save my children's lives and raise awareness about MPS 1, and I'd love your help. If you found inspiration in today's episode, please subscribe, share, or take a screenshot and post it on social media so others can join us. To learn more or to get involved, visit KennedyLadd.org. Let's keep rising up rare together.